Alright, so I haven't made a video in a while, and we can cover that a little bit later, but for now, let's talk about As We Descend. As We Descend is a roguelike deck building game in early access. The general premise here is that you are defending a vault city, and its lantern statues are keeping the dark miasma away, which has consumed the rest of the world. While evolving tech, your vault city descends into the core of the world where you find various resources, and as you go deeper, you encounter more fearsome creatures that lurk below. So what drew me to this game? Well, I've been hungry for a new roguelike deck building game, and after having a few misfires and scrolling through Steam, I was drawn to the art of this game and decided to just give it a try. What continued to draw me in was the lower barrier of entry that throughout unlocks and level ups ended up getting more and more complex and challenging. As We Descend's gameplay is broken into two main parts. One part managing the vault city, using your discovered resources to grow your technologies, buy items, cards, card upgrades, and leveling up your expeditioners. The second part of the loop is going to be going on the expeditions themselves. This is where you gather the resources or defend the city from bosses. Pretty much the combat of the game, and that's where the action is. The basics are you defend your lantern tower while trying to take down the hordes of enemies. Every turn, you get a handful of action cards based on the units you're using at the time and the cards that you have for your lantern. There are a couple card resource systems available in the game currently, and a third one does seem to be on the way. As mentioned, this game, As We Descend, is in early access still. The first resource system is pretty basic. It's the common action point based system. You get a handful of points each turn that refresh every turn, and you use them to play cards. The second style is a charge generating system where you have an energy level. You start at 3, and then some cards you play and use will add to that energy level, and cards will end up costing a certain energy amount. Certain cards will also have different actions depending on if you use them when you have full energy, or when that card fully depletes the energy source, you'll get an extra bonus effect as well. Now there's a common resource between these two called Favor, which is usually required for playing stronger cards. Favor is a resource that you gather via expeditions or city actions, and it's limited, but it carries over between battles. It can also be used as a currency as well in some cases, but it's always good to make sure you have a handful of Favor on you whenever going into battle. Now your cards can do various things, but to distill it down to its core, you attack, defend, and support. When you go on expeditions, they'll let you choose 1 to possibly 4 units, depending on the challenge you've selected. And there's a wide range of different unit types that you can unlock. Some are pretty basic, like guy with a sword or an archer with a little bit of steampunk flair, but there's more advanced ones too that look like Warhammer characters, or even one that looks like the Big Daddy from BioShock. Honestly, I was a little surprised by the amount of units, as each unit has their own little deck of abilities that you grow and curate. So when you go on an expedition, your main deck that you're playing with is composed of the little decks from all the units and lantern cards you have. The goal here is you want to try to start getting your decks to synergize with each other, and given that there's a good amount of units and each unit seems to have a couple different paths you can walk down, it really does make each run feel somewhat different to each other. The thing that makes the runs feel the same is getting the balance right. Each unit tends to lean into one role, attack, protect, or support. However, many units do blur that line, but the way you go about setting that up each run is where the differences come, meaning you might have one unit that plays more of an attack role, but then the next run they end up filling in a support role or becoming more defensive, which is kind of interesting and fun. The combat itself works by having different lanes. You have a single lantern that is in its own lane, which you need to protect, and then you have a support zone as well as a guard zone. Sometimes you need to be in a certain lane for certain attacks to work or get certain buffs to your attacks. Enemies will also attack certain zones, so you need to move your units around sometimes and be mindful of where they're being placed and making sure you're shielding up the proper units that are going to get hit. Enemies also use a similar lane structure, moving their tankier and melee units to the front to protect their backlaned units. A big piece of combat outside of just trying to do as much damage as possible is protecting yourself and, more importantly, putting your barriers up. The enemies will start doing a lot of damage, especially once you get to later on in the game where you start running with modifiers on. In some cases, enemies will also be able to just directly attack your lantern, regardless of what lane setups you have. I have mixed feelings about them just getting these free shots off, but you can also stun enemies to prevent their attacks, which is a very useful tool to use. Some bosses will just have a big mega attack that comes out after a while, and you won't really be able to barrier or defend your way through it, so using a stun to prevent that is usually pretty key. Most expeditions, the way they operate is if your lantern falls and you have a unit still alive, you'll be able to do a rematch of the zone. However, when you're fighting a boss, this usually isn't the case. But doing this rematch on the basic trials does allow you to get rewards still, it just greatly lowers the rewards. However, if you're doing a boss battle and your lantern falls, you immediately lose, which is kind of why I have mixed feelings about the mega attacks. In regular expeditions though, if your units dies, you can get them back, although it does cost resources to resurrect them, which could be better spent in other locations in the city. Of course, if all your units die, your lantern will automatically die because there's nothing to really defend it. So getting into the town management piece, it maybe isn't the most engaging thing, but it is a type of card game in itself. You get envoy cards and human cards that you can send to various locations to buy, shop, sell for you, and have random events occur. Plus the items you unlock through your expeditions also become cards themselves, which you can barter with to buy, sell, or just trade to get different currencies. Key things you want to do in the city building area is 1, getting your city barriers up, because that gives your lanterns overall more health in combat. Then using your resources to keep your expeditioners up and healthy. Then you want to try to balance your resources out so that way you have enough favor, so when you go into combat you can play those stronger cards. Then you want to work on upgrading your cards and making your units stronger, giving them passive abilities, growing their unit size, and then of course acquiring and upgrading your lantern cards as well. The town actually seems a little bit confusing at first, but once you get a few runs in and get the hang of how the town operates and what things do, you really start flying through it after a while, and then you get to focus on the fun stuff, combat, and the various bosses. The game runs right now do feel a little quick. Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but since the game is in early access, I feel like that might be subject to change still. Once you complete a run, be it victory or death, you will get a bunch of points from various actions like killing enemies and so on. But it also includes actions that you can take during your run, like attacking with a certain unit a certain amount of times, or applying a certain amount of debuffs to an enemy. This all unlocks various, what I'll just call XP points. Getting these XP points also unlocks the modifiers that make the game stronger, and there's different tiers and upgrades to that, so there's really a lot going on here. But there are a couple things that stand out, both good and bad. So like I mentioned, I really do like the art style of this game. It's initially what drove me to make the purchase and try it out, and I really like the design of the units, both your units and the enemy units. Our units, as mentioned, have influences from various franchises, and the enemy units are all horrific looking monsters, and I don't know, there's something about them that I find enjoyable. As mentioned though, the fun of the game comes from combat, and in combat itself, your units kind of look a little lackluster. While this is a card game, the combat looks very Moba-like, which more on that point later. But the units are kind of small, especially when you're fighting much bigger enemies, and they kind of lose their visual identity at times in combat. And there's also not a lot of flair that happens when you use your attacks. Most of the attacks in this game are general hit with some sparks. There's a couple outliers maybe, but for the most part they're kind of bland, and there's no real, whoa, that ability looks so cool and amazing, I want to make sure I use that again. Also, the way the game communicates what's going on in each turn and the attacks maybe isn't presented in the best way. You have to do a lot of hovering over icons to see exactly what's happening and where enemies are attacking, and I kind of wish all this information was just displayed in a slightly better and cleaner way. After playing something like Monster Train 2 for a bit, where they basically feed you damage indicators all over the place, you realize that quality of life feature is pretty nice, and I just wish this game presented that incoming damage information a little bit cleaner way as to what's going to occur on the battlefield. One thing I'm also on the fence on when it comes to the battlefield is when enemies are attacking, it usually is based on the chance of hitting everyone in a certain row. This causes you to either move units around so only certain ones are in the row, or just to try to avoid the damage in general by having nobody in the row. And of course trying to barrier units up in that row so they can survive attacks. But it can feel a bit of a coin flip if you have multiple units in the same row, as you might shield one up only just to have it attack the completely other guy, and it doesn't feel good when that happens. It kind of feels like a deliberate design choice, a way to sort of give a random chance to where the damage is gonna go, and I'm not really 100% sure how I feel about it yet. There are units that get provoke cards, but they're not the most common things. But since you never really know which unit's gonna get attacked in a row, that combined with the weaker display of information, it makes combat feel a little fuzzy sometimes of what's going on, where I kind of wish it would be more direct in, this unit's gonna get attacked, this unit's gonna take damage, or at least if there was more ways and more tools to provoke and make sure that damage is incoming to certain units in the row. That would be helpful as well, because I've found what happens is sometimes you'll burn all your energy on barriers and movement and everything, and eventually you're just finding yourself not able to kill units because you're focusing too much on being defensive. And yeah, this game does have a dark truth to it though, but I am enjoying the overall loop of this game. It's scratching a roguelike deck builder itch that I was having, and I would recommend it if card games like this are of your liking. But as mentioned, combat of this game, it does kind of look like a MOBA despite it being a card game. For a couple runs while I was defending my towers, with its various lanes and units looking almost like minions at times, it started to remind me of something. A dark game from my past, a game that's known to steal the souls of its players, turning the faint of heart toxic. And that game is League of Legends. And I thought I was a bit crazy at first for kind of making this connection. I mean, these are very different styles of games. But funny enough, when I looked into it, the devs of this game, Boxdragon, are all based in Sweden, and they have veteran Riot members on the team. So I can loosely see where some of these influences are coming from. There also seems to be members on this team from Stunlock Studios. I'm not very familiar with that studio and those games, but this new studio, Boxdragon, does seem to be a much smaller studio, and As We Descend is actually their debut title. So while I do have some small nitpicks about how the information is displayed and some of the visuals, as an apocalyptic roguelike card game, I think it's worth a shot and worth giving a try. If you're looking for something with more visual flair, maybe this won't hit the mark, but this has been a very much chill, shut off my brain and do a run type game, and I'm enjoying that, so overall I would recommend it. So as mentioned in the beginning of the video, why haven't I made a video in a little bit? Well, it's simple. I've been pretty brain burnt from my real job and did some traveling and touching grass, and honestly just getting the time to make some videos was getting hard to come by. Also, I did go out of number order for Final Fantasies, and the current Final Fantasy I'm playing is taking a little bit to get through because of its nature. But a big video on that will eventually come out, although it might be a little bit different than some of my other Final Fantasy reviews because I have a very different relationship with this Final Fantasy. So if that sounds interesting, please like and sub and let me know what you think about As We Descend. Have you even heard of it? Have you tried it? Do you think it looks interesting at all? Let me know. As mentioned, I think it's a pretty fun game overall with a cool art style and some neat mechanics. The visuals do feel a little bit bland at times, but I think if you're looking for a roguelike deck building game that's got some light resource management systems in there, this could tickle your fancy and be worth a check out. But as always, drive fast, take chances. Later, nerds.